Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tawnia Lives, and I am from Light and Love, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me today. Today, we're going to be discussing the thought patterns and the unhelpful thinking that we've created through our survivor mode likely and in our recovery patterns. This subject is a great subject to help us overcome some of the things that we're thinking and get us to a place of more realistic thought patterns. So I hope you enjoy this video, and thank you. We want to ask ourselves, what is unhelpful thoughts? So unhelpful thoughts are those negative stories that we tell ourselves. These negative stories may not always be rooted in reality or in fact, but for whatever reason, when we're in our survival mode or we're in our mode of unhelpful thoughts, we're not able really to see the full spectrum of reality. And it's created a sense of protection and a way to keep yourself safe. When you're in survival mode, you're just trying to survive. When you take a step away from survival mode and you get into a more realistic thought pattern, you're going to be able to see, okay, so this is not necessarily rooted in thought, but this is triggered by my emotional response to trauma or having something happen to me in my past that wasn't very helpful and healthy. So the unhelpful thoughts, again, are these stories that we're telling ourselves. So we're going to discover together, how do we get past those unhelpful thoughts and how do we create an action plan for them? Unhelpful thinking is, again, those unrealistic negative thoughts we have about ourselves, about our situation, and about our future. It's really important that we look at the root cause of those unhelpful thoughts and where it's actually living within our situation or in our lives. Because once we recognize where it's rooted and where we're kind of pulling that unrealistic thought from, then we can start creating a pattern of realistic thought patterns around our situations, ourselves, and about our future. Unhelpful thinking affects how you handle your recovery. It can cause you to withdraw from the people that you love, your friends, your loved ones, your colleagues, people that you admire, your mentors. It can reduce your motivation. I just don't want to get out of bed today. I just don't want to go to work. It can lower your self-care. I just don't need another shower today. And it can feed into negative emotions, which those negative emotions can quickly move to negative actions and then a very impactful negative consequence. We're going to look at the story of Falula. So as you look on this, you will see unhelpful thoughts cycle pattern. So the unhelpful thought that came to Falula is that she's going to be late for work because on the way to work she got a flat tire. And now her unhelpful thought is, oh my gosh, my boss is going to hate me. I'm such a horrible employee. Nobody's going to like me anymore. So that negative, unhelpful thought pattern moved to an emotion. She felt shame. She felt embarrassment. She felt like she was failing at her life and at her job. So what she does is she takes that negative emotion and she turns it into an action. So Falula may say, you know what, I'm going to lose my job anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and go home and get back into bed. I don't have the motivation for this. So then that action then creates a stressful situation. So now her boss calls and she's like, hey, Falula, what's going on? Where are you at? We're really worried about you. And Falula, instead of just being late for work, now she's considered a no-show. And that has created this negative, stressful situation. So she hangs up the phone with her supervisor and she's like, man, now I'm a no-show. I'm just not going to have a job anymore. They're going to fire me. I might as well just give up. And that creates another unhelpful thought. So now her boss, she's afraid that she's going to lose her job. So there's more of that shame and that's more of that embarrassment. And then it creates then the cycle to start all over again and get into a new emotion and a new unhelpful thought. And it just keeps going and spiraling out of control until we put a pause on that, until we look at the pattern that we're creating for ourselves. When we look back at this story that Falula told herself, there were 4 key components. There was the unhelpful thought that led to the unhelpful emotion, that led to the unhelpful action, and then the stressful outcome. That stressful outcome then once again created a new pattern of unhelpful thoughts. As we look at each of these components, we are going to understand that we can create an action plan to stop each one of those components from continuing. Looking at unhelpful thoughts. This is the negative self-talk, the harsh self-criticism about ourselves, our future, or about our situation. It's that unrealistic or unfair thought pattern that we're creating. That can lead to an unhelpful emotion. Now, all emotions are very helpful in the fact that they're teaching something to us about our mind and our body. Whether it be sadness, anger, frustration, the emotion itself is helpful because it is leading us to something to help us better understand. But when it becomes unhelpful is when we take that emotion and we create an action from it. And that action could be withdrawal from others, poor self-care, or poor activity level. And then that action can create a stressful outcome. It can be isolating yourself from loved ones or having conflict. It can be having increased health conditions or strained relationships. And because of that stressful outcome, it can recreate a new cycle of unhelpful thoughts and continue down this pattern. So what's important about this is understanding what the unhelpful thought is and creating an action plan at any one of these areas so that we can stop the cycle in the middle of wherever we are and create a more realistic thought pattern. As we look at the realistic thought patterns, it's helpful to look at a helpful thought cycle. So when we talked about Falula before, she had this unhelpful thought that she was going to be late for work, that her boss was going to hate her, and that she was going to lose her job. And as we look at a helpful thought cycle, we want to look at a more realistic way of thinking. So in this scenario, Falula leans into her emotions of curiosity, hopefulness, and encouragement. And because she leans into those emotions, it helps her create an action. She calls her work, she tries to let her work know, hey, I got a flat tire on my way, but I'm on my way. Now, we do not know if this is going to lead to a stressful situation or not, because we have no control over how her supervisor will receive this information. So now the supervisor's on the phone. She says, Falula, take your time. Don't worry about it. Get here when you get here. But please stop by my desk so that I can lay eyes on you and know that you're doing okay. So that all led to another realistic thought pattern. Hey, I'm a valued employee that's cared for, and they know that I'm reliable. What's important in that is at any point in time on that helpful thought cycle, we can really go back into an unhelpful thought cycle. If we remember, the supervisor said, come to my desk, I want to lay eyes on you. That could have quickly turned into Falula thinking, oh my gosh, I am going to get fired. She wants to see me when I get there, and spiral into another unhelpful thought cycle. So it's really important at each stage of this that we look at how do we maintain those realistic thought patterns. Creating a realistic thought pattern in our brain is trying to recreate in our brain, taking away from the negative and finding a positive and a more realistic way of thinking. And how we can get there is we can ask 4 pretty critical questions every time we have this unrealistic thought pattern. So one of those is, can I get more evidence to support this belief? So in the scenario with Falula, she said, I'm going to get fired because I'm late for work. So what she did was she got more evidence to support this belief by calling in, she created an action, and she talked to her supervisor. So whenever one of these unrealistic thought patterns come up, how do you move through it? You need to contact your support system. You need to talk to friends and family members, a colleague, a professional, and get more evidence to support this belief. It's more likely than not that it is unrealistic thinking, and you're going to, if you have supportive people, if you have people that can remain objective, tell you that this is not necessarily rooted in realistic thoughts. The next piece is, would most people agree with this thought? So when you think about unrealistic thoughts, oftentimes it's harsh self-criticism. So an example of this is I was working in the field and I was sitting at my desk and I said, "Oh my gosh, I am so stupid." And one of my colleagues from behind heard me say that and very gently said, "Please don't talk about my friend like that." And what that did was it switched my brain. It said, would most people agree with that thought? In that scenario, no. She did not agree with that thought. In fact, she corrected that thought for me. So it's, again, going back to your support system, going back to trusted allies and professionals that you can ask these questions to. Would you agree with this thought? Then you want to ask yourself, what's going to happen if I continue down this unrealistic thought pattern? What will happen if I continue to think this way? Well, it can lead to an unhelpful thought. It can lead to stressful situations. It can lead to keeping on that pattern of unhelpful thoughts and isolation and rumination on things that are not necessarily rooted in truth. So what is going to happen? Ask yourself, if I keep on this thought pattern, what is going to be the consequences of that thought? And then the last question that is super important, and I know that this is something that's more challenging for me than the others, is what would I say to a loved one if they were sharing this same thought? Now, when I talk to my loved ones or people that I care for, I am so much more gentle. I am so much more loving. I am so much more supporting and caring of what they're going through. But what I need to do is apply that same thought pattern to myself. I am the one that is with myself for 24 hours a day. I am the one that needs to understand the importance of myself and have those loving and kind, supportive words to say to myself. And if you keep going through this whole scenario of realistic thinking and asking those questions when those thoughts come up, you will move through to more realistic thinking patterns and help you overcome those unhelpful thoughts. Thank you again for joining me today. This is Tawnia Lives from Light and Love. I really enjoyed sharing this information with you today. It is a shorter version of a longer extended version that we will be offering in the future. And we will be looking at those thought patterns a little bit more differently in the extended version. Thank you so much for being here with me. Please make sure to like if this was something that was informative to you and helped you through your process. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you again. This is Tawnia from Light and Love.